All right. So when the directions in your test, and I notice that some of you are not following the directions on the worksheet. So it is very important that you you solve these rational equations the way the directions tells you to do. Some of you are not using the resource when you went to that worksheet and you lost quite a bit of points. So even though your final solution may be correct, the way that I asked you to do this was not the way that you did it. So let's talk about that. So the direction is going to say this. So I'm going to tell you now again. And the directions will say solve each equation, solve each equation by multiplying both sides by the least common denominator and clearing the fractions. So I don't know how else to say that. Some of you are not doing that. You're just doing it the way that you want to do it. And you're not getting all of your points. You're getting a very few points. So let's look at number one. So number one, we have this. We have x plus 9 divided by x equals negative 10. So x plus 9 divided by x equals negative 10. Okay, so we have to find the least common denominator first. And also notice that in this equation, I have three rational expressions: x divided by 1, 9 divided by x, negative 10 divided by 1. And notice that in this rational expression here, I have a variable expression in the denominator. So remember, you cannot divide by 0. So you also need to determine what the restrictions are. What are the restrictions of the variable on the variable? What values cannot you use? Can't you use? So you look at the denominator, and that's just x. And you ask yourself, where is x equal to 0? Well, x is equal to 0 when x is equal to 0. So 0 is your restriction. X cannot equal 0. So in some of the worksheets, when you solved rational equations, you were asked to indicate the restrictions. Now, let's talk about the LCD. So the only denominator that involves a rational expression or a expression other than 1, see this is x over 1, negative 10 divided by 1, is this. And so your least common denominator is just x. All right, now let's talk about how you're going to do these directions here. So the direction says this: multiply both sides by the LCD. So once you find the LCD, you're going to multiply both sides by the LCD. So you're going to say this. You're going to put this in parentheses, x plus 9 divided by x. You multiply by the LCD. And you're going to take this side and you can multiply by the LCD. That is the way you're supposed to do this according to the directions and according to the resource that was provided for you with the worksheet that you had to turn in. So now you're going to get rid of the parentheses, so you can distribute. So I get x times x is x squared plus x times 9 divided by x equals, and the negative 10 times x is a negative 10x. Okay? Now notice I can reduce these x's. So remember the whole purpose of multiplying by the LCD is to get this denominator right here to be a factor of 1. And now it is, because watch, I can divide those out, and you now have a factor of 1. And so now this becomes x squared plus 9 equals a negative 10x. So now I went from a rational equation to a quadratic equation. So now I'm going to solve this quadratic equation. So I'm going to put this in standard form. So I'm going to get x squared. When I bring the negative 10x over, I get a positive 10x plus 9, that's 10x, plus 9 equals 0. All right, and then let's factor. So I'm going to get x plus 9 times x plus 1 equal 0. And then we're going to set each factor equal to 0 using the 0 factor property. I get x plus 9 equals 0, x plus 1 equals 0. So and I'm going to call this my proposed solutions. So you may see that word on the test, and you may see that word on the final exam. And they're going to ask you, what are the proposed solutions? So the proposed solutions. So my proposed solutions are x equal -9 and x equal -1. Now, so they're right now we're calling these proposed solutions. So now you got to go back and check and see if that's a restriction. So are these proposed solutions a restriction? And the answer is no. So therefore you're going to say, so these proposed solutions are actually solutions. So your solutions are x equal -9 and x equal -1. So that's how you do this when the direction says solve by multiplying both sides by the LCD and clearing the fractions. Don't do it any other way. All right, so that's number one. Let's look at number two. So number two, we have x minus 5 divided by x plus 6 equal 2x plus 3 divided by 2x minus 1. All right, so we got to find the least common denominator. And so in finding the least common denominator, one of the things you have to do is to make sure that your denominators are factored. And they are. There's nothing else you can do to x plus 6, and there's nothing else you can do to x minus 1. So my least common denominator is going to include every distinct factor that you see. So I see an x plus 6, that's in the LCD. I see a 2x minus 1, that's in the LCD. So my least common denominator is the product of these two factors. Now we got to find the restrictions. So remember, you cannot divide by 0. So you got to ask yourself, where is x plus 6 equal to 0? Well, x plus 6 equals 0 and x equals -6. So that's one of your restrictions. X cannot equal -6. Then we go to the next one, 2x minus 1. So where's 2x minus 1 equals 0? Well, 2x minus 1 is equal to 0 when 2x equals 1, and that means when x equals 1/2. So those are your two restrictions. So x cannot equal -6, and x cannot equal 1/2. All right, so once you find your least common denominator and once you find your restrictions, the next step is to multiply both sides by the least common denominator. So I must see this. Now notice there's only one rational expression here, one rational expression here. When I did the previous problem, the left-hand side had two rational expressions, so that's why I put that in parentheses. On this side, there was only one, so I did not use parentheses. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm not going to put this in parentheses, so I'm just going to say the LCD. So x, I'm going to go ahead and put it down here. So x plus 6 times 2x, that's a 2x, minus 1, times this side, times the left side, x minus 5 divided by x plus 6 equals, and then the LCD times this, x plus 6 times 2x minus 1 times 2x plus 3 divided by 2x minus 1. So that's what you're supposed to write. When it says, when the direction says, solve each equation by multiplying both sides by the least common denominator and clearing the fractions, that is what you're supposed to do. If you do it any other way, you're losing almost all of your points. Okay, now, the next step is to, remember the whole purpose of multiplying by the LCD is to get these denominators to be factors of 1s, and now you will have that. The x plus 6's divide out. The 2x minus 1's divide out. And now what you have is this, though. Here's what you have. You have 2x minus 1 times x minus 5. So you have 2x minus 1 times x minus 5 equal. And over here, you have x plus 6 times 2x plus 3. So x plus 6. Notice I'm putting 2x plus 3 in parentheses times 2x plus 3. And now we're going to FOIL this out, FOIL that out. So when I FOIL this out, over here, that's 2x squared. The outer is a negative 10x. The inner is a negative x. And the last is a positive 5. Over here, when I FOIL, x times 2x is 2x squared. The outer is 3x. The inner is 4x. And the last is 6. Combining like terms, I get 2x squared. Negative 10x and a negative 1x is a negative 11x plus 5 equals 2x squared. 3x plus 4x is 7x plus 6. Now, notice I went from a rational equation, and you may think that this is quadratic, but it's not really, because when you subtract 2x squareds, when you subtract 2x squared from both sides, you really end up with a linear equation. So you went from a rational equation to a linear equation. And then we're just going to bring all the variables to one side. So I'm going to go ahead and add 11x to both sides. And so I get 5 equals 7x plus 11x is 18x plus 6. Subtract 6 from both sides. Subtract 6 from both sides. I get negative 1 equals 18x. And then divide both sides by 18. I get x to be negative 1 over 18. All right, now let me just make sure now always go back and verify you didn't make a mistake. So again, remember the first thing you're going to do is find the least common denominator, which is x plus 6 times 2x minus 1. Multiply both sides by the least common denominator. Then you're going to reduce. So you have 2x minus 1, x minus 5. And over here, the 2x minus 1 is divided out, so you have x plus 6 times 2x plus 3. All right, so let's see, that's negative, so that's 2x squared, a negative 10x and a negative 1x and a positive 5, so that's correct. And that becomes this, negative 11x plus 5, like this. Over here, that's 3x, and that's 4x, and that's 6, so that's 7x, so that's okay so far. All right, subtract 2x squared. Then we're going to add 11x. All right, so it looks like I didn't make an error. So I get x equals negative 118. Now you got to ask yourself, remember that's going to be our proposed solution. Our proposed solution. All right, but you got to check that against the restriction. So here are my restrictions. There are 2 of them. I cannot have x equal negative 6, and I cannot have x equal 1/2. Okay? So, sorry, you did make a mistake. X plus 6 and not x. Okay, so apparently I made a mistake. So let me check this again. So let's see. X plus 6 and not x plus 2. Where am I? So x plus 6. X plus 6. Oh, I sure did right here. Yep, thank you. All right, so this is where I made a mistake. All right, so I'm glad y'all are paying attention. All right, so that was my mistake. So let's fix this. So you have 2x squared, 3x, and that's 12x. So let's fix this to 12x. All right, and that's going to be 18. All right, 6 times 3 is 18. All right, so that's going to make this 15x plus 18. All right, so this side's correct. Now on this side, that's going to be 15x plus 18. All right, now I'm going to add 11x to both sides. So 15x plus 11x is 26x, right? Plus 18. Then you're going to subtract 18 from both sides. Let me go ahead and just put that here. 5 and a negative 18 is a negative 13, right? Equal, and then that's 0, so that's 26x. Divide both sides by 26. I get x to be negative 1/2. All right, so I get negative 1/2. So yeah, so be careful because you could easily make a mistake as you go through this process. So I had x plus 6, and then I just, for some reason, wrote x plus 2. Okay, now that's your proposed solution. That's your proposed solution. So you may see the word indicate the proposed solution. And then you have to determine, well, is this proposed solution right here a solution to the original? And to determine that, you just look at your restrictions. Is negative 1/2 a restriction? No, it's not. My restrictions are negative 6 and positive 1/2. So you're going to say solution is x equal negative 1/2. Okay? All right. Now let's look at one more. So this is going to be number 3. All right, number 3. Number 3, let's suppose we had 7 divided by x minus 5 plus 2 divided by x equal negative 10 divided by x squared minus 5x. All right, so before we find the least common denominator, we have to make sure we factor all the denominators. Now, these two denominators that I'm pointing to, there's not anything else I can do with those. But over here, I can factor out an x. And when I factor out an x, I get x times x minus 5. So my least common denominator is going to include every distinct factor that you see. So I see an x minus 5. That's going to be part of the LCD. I see an x. That's going to be part of the LCD, but I'm putting it in front. I always put the monomial factor in front. I see an x. I already have it. I see an x minus 5. I already have it. So that's your LCD. Now you have to determine the restrictions. So what makes this denominator 0? So ask yourself, where is x minus 5 equal to 0? Well, x minus 5 is equal to 0 when x equals 5. Because if x is 5, 5 minus 5 is 0. 7 divided by 0 is undefined. So that's why you're finding the restrictions. You're finding what makes this rational expression undefined. And so when x is 5, 5 minus 5 is 0, so that makes this 7 divided by 5, which is undefined. So I cannot use 5. 5 cannot be a solution. Then we look at the next one. Well, that one's easy because what makes that 0? Well, this denominator 0 when x equals 0. There's no other choice there. There's nothing else to do. X is 0. So those are your two restrictions. And you go to the next one. Well, this factor x you already took care of. That was this one. This factor of x minus 5, that was that one. So those are your two restrictions. Okay, now once you find your least common denominator, once you find your restrictions, then here's what you have to write. Okay, so notice that I have two rational expressions on this side. So you can put that in parentheses, 7 divided by x minus 5 plus 2 divided by x. And that has to be multiplied by the LCD, x times x minus 5. Equal, now when you rewrite this one, make sure you write it in factored form. Don't write it as x squared minus 5x. Write it in factored form. So this becomes the LCD, which is x times x minus 5 times negative 10 divided by x times x minus 5. Now let's go ahead and distribute. And so when I distribute, now remember, this is what you're supposed to write. Don't write anything else. The LCD times the left side, the LCD times the right side. And now you're going to get rid of the parentheses, so you can distribute. So I get x times x minus 5 times that first fraction plus the LCD, x times x minus 5 times the second fraction equal the LCD times the right-hand side. So x times x minus 5 times negative 10 divided by x times x minus 5. Now remember, the whole purpose of multiplying by the LCD is to get these denominators to be ones, factors of ones. And now you do have that because the x minus 5s divide out. You have a factor of 1. The factors of x divide out. You have a factor of 1. This x divides with this, and this x minus 5 divides with this. And so now you have x times 1 times 7, which is 7x, plus 1 times x minus 5 times 2. Now, make sure you're careful when you rewrite this. You're gonna write this as 2 times x minus 5, like this, 2 times x minus 5 in parentheses, equal 1 times negative 10 is negative 10. And I want you to notice I went from a rational equation to a linear equation. And so I'm going to go ahead and distribute. So I get 7x plus 2x minus 10 equal negative 10. Combining like terms, I get 7x plus 2x is 9x. And then minus 10 equal, 9x minus 10 equal negative 10. Adding 10 to both sides. Adding 10 to both sides, I get 9x equal 0. Divide both sides by 9. I get x to be 0 divided by 9, 0. Now that's a proposed solution. All right, now that x equals 0. It's called a proposed solution because this is a solution to this linear equation. You can check this. It doesn't matter which one you go to. Watch. If you go to, let's say, this one here, 9 times 0, x is 0, 9 times 0 is 0, 0 minus 10 is a negative 10. So that is true. This equation, this equation, this equation, the solution is 0. So again, 7 times 0 is 0. 0 minus 5 is a negative 5. 2 times a negative 5 is a negative 10. But the problem is that, is it a solution to the original equation, to this rational equation? And the answer is no, because 0 was a restriction. Because see, if you look at x equals 0 and you substitute it into this one, you get 2 divided by 0, which is undefined. And the same thing here. Negative 10 divided by, see, that's 0. 0 times negative 5 would be 0. So negative 10 divided by 0. So you get undefined. All right. Now, I don't know what you mean by if I get 0 for an answer, it wouldn't be correct. Well, for this, it would not be, because 0 can be an answer, can be a solution. It's just not a solution to this one because that is a restriction. So you got to find your restriction. So your question has to be based on your restrictions. All right, so 0 can be an answer. It's just not an answer to this one because that's a restriction. Okay, now listen carefully. So x equals 0 is a restriction. We sometimes call this an extraneous root. So you may have heard that in one of the lessons that you studied, extraneous root. So meaning a false root. So that's false root. So since that is a false root, meaning this, meaning that it's a solution to this, but it's not a solution to the original equation. So x equals 0, this proposed solution is actually an extraneous root or extraneous solution. But here's the thing, you got to answer the question. So the question is, what's the solution to this equation? Well, all I had was one proposed solution. It is a restriction, so therefore there is no solution. So you would say no solution. All right. So the whole point though of going over this again was because in the worksheets, quite a few students were not doing it based on the directions. So it's very important that you find the LCD, you find the restrictions, and you multiply both sides by the LCD, and you distribute and do all the things you got to do. Then you look at your proposed solution and determine if it's a restriction. If it's not a restriction, then that's a solution. If this is the only proposed solution and it's a restriction, then you say no solution. So you compare that with the other one. So in this case, remember we did number 1? So when we did number 1, there were 2 proposed solutions, 2 of them. None of them were restrictions because the only restriction we had was 0 in this case. They were not restrictions, so therefore we have to say they are solutions. Okay, so that is all I wanted to do with solving rational equations, and that's the end of solving rational equations.